Got a new sap I am very happy with, because this is a new sap with an old design, a real classic. So we're going to check it out and wax some stuff with it. First, it's by Robert Garcia of Shop Number 7. The one we're looking at today has some of his distinctive tooling, but notice the shape there. That's probably my favorite overall sap outline, sap or blackjack. It's got that, the thin-waisted grip, but then it swells out the striking portion from there. So it looks like you're holding a knife, except you'd strike with the sides. A flat sap can do a lot of damage with an edge-on strike, even though that was never intended by the originator. And this one would no doubt do damage that way as well if you swung it like hatchet style, but that's not what the design lends itself to, especially in terms of overall durability. It's meant for that. A little bit later in the video, we'll do some much harder striking than that. So beautiful leather, as you can see. Beautiful leather and leather work. The layers of leather in the handle are pretty stiff right now, but that's going to change over time, so it'll get more flexible. When I talked about the old-fashioned design, we would call this a fold-over sap, and in this next image, you can really see what I'm talking about. Take a piece of leather, actually multiple layers of leather, cut out the desired outline, and then, literally fold it over. It thereby encases the striking head, and then you sew it up. One of the virtues of this design is that you don't have to stitch all the way around. Think of like a classic modern flat sap. Modern meaning 20th century, like these 3 antiques from my collection here. See how the stitching goes all the way around the instrument. But the one I'm showing you today harkens back a century earlier in design and is more like this other antique from my collection. And this one is not made out of leather, and you can see the handle is very flexible, so you would definitely only strike with this one with the sideways slapping motions. And you can really see with this picture here how most of the mass, the overwhelming majority, is in the striking portion. And that's part of what allows these to hit so hard even though they're so small, in combination with the flexibility, but they're going to have varying degrees of flexibility. And like the one I'm showing you today is still pretty stiff because it's brand new, and we're going to smack something as hard as we can and see what happens. And I'm going to use a straight baton, wooden, as a comparison. Our target is the old sturdy chop block. God, this thing is like at least 20 years old. I gotta give the manufacturer Century their due on that one. You get your money's worth. So, here's our beautiful fold-over sap. It looks big in this image here because of the perspective, but this thing fits entirely in my pocket. And this one is a soft sap, so there's metal shot packed in there. And here's the other tool we'll be using, a traditional style billy club. I haven't made a video on this one yet. I will. Love this thing. This is from RMJ Tactical. You might have noticed the shaft swells up towards the tip, so at the striking end it's at its widest. It's a weapon that was of course used on the street for centuries, and we're going to compare it to that little thing. Look at that size difference. Think about the leverage, the much wider circle you're going to describe with your swinging motion with the baton. And speaking of the baton, I was about to hit the target with the sap, and then I thought, well, first let's go with, I guess, what we'll call the control experiment. It's got a nice contoured grip, and let's give it a shot. And I mentioned the contoured grip for a reason. It's got a good grip. It fits my hand well. But you saw me shake out my striking hand for a reason. It hurt. That did not feel good at all. I knew shock would come back up through the tool and into my hand, but that was way more than I expected. Because this isn't a giant target, because I knew I would displace it, knock it out of the way. Which it did, but that hurt my hand and wrist, even part of my forearm. You'll see me here in a second rubbing it. And by way of comparison, before I use the sap, let me just punch this thing. It bothered my hand a little bit because it was still hurting from the baton swing. But check this out. Where did the hitting pad end up? Much further away, got, way more displacement and with a lot less stress to my hand. Does that mean you'd be better off punching than using a baton? Well, no. The baton gives you reach advantage, you're hitting with something that isn't your body, and some people must understand displacement is not a perfect indicator of damage. If you notice the geometry at play there, at one point my forearm is basically spearing into the target, or practically, with that hook punch. And so after the initial hit, it was really just pushing the object along. That's why it went so far away. But I did the punch to have a second point of comparison to the sap, so let's get to it. And spoiler alert, I think the results are very impressive. Because it gave me the best results overall. And what I mean by that? Well, we got plenty of displacement, like with the punch, but like with the baton, I had the benefit of striking with a weapon instead of with my hand, so I couldn't hurt the bones in my hand. But unlike with the baton, I felt no hand shock. The baton gives you good smacking energy, but it clearly does not give you good pushing energy. The sap gave me both, all while protecting my hand way better than either the punch, which is natural enough, or even the baton. I mean, again, the baton, that legitimately hurt my hand. And don't get me wrong, I could go up against a heavy bag with the straight baton there and show you all kinds of cool moves and do all kinds of strikes without hurting my hand. But swinging through that dense little target, which I think is a pretty good body approximation, it's just something about the way it feels. It's got some softness, but it's hard and dense on the inside. Doing that with the wooden baton was not pleasant for my weapon hand. But back to this guy and this weapon type in general, pretty impressive. That's what I said about these in my book, why they were so popular for so long. The power of a full-size bludgeon, but in a package that fits in your pocket. And of course, then there's the downsides. It does not have the reach of that straight stick. You can't block an incoming weapon or do cool joint locks. But then the compensation for that is the concealability and ease of carry. And then on top of all of that, just look at that leather. You know, a pair of brass knuckles or a Kubotan or an ASP. And it just can't compare visually, in my opinion. This one in particular, a great example of an old-time design that still, as you saw, works quite well.